Hello from Nicopure Labs. I'm Patricia Kovacevic, General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer. We're here today with Charles Hamshaw-Thomas, the Head of Legal and Regulatory Affairs for Nicopure Labs for Europe. He's based in the UK and visiting with us in Trinity today. Charles has extensive industry expertise and in fact has been in the nicotine industry for a long period of time, in addition to being a very respected lawyer and quite involved with all of the discussions leading to the Tobacco Products Directive. Good afternoon, Charles, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us here today.
My pleasure, thank you.
So the topic of our discussion today is the state of the industry. Where is industry going? From the perspective of the United Kingdom, looking into what is happening both in the UK, in the US, and worldwide. So just let me start with the question, where is industry today?
That's a very good question. I think I would answer that by saying, to understand where it is today and then where it's going, I think it's important to understand where it's come from. It is still a very young, nascent industry, but it's an industry with an incredible story. It's been a meteoric few years for the industry. There are estimates that the industry is now worth globally $7 billion. The World Health Organization chose to put a number I saw recently of 10 billion on that. The industry was worth $50 million in 2009. That's only 7 years ago. So that is an absolutely meteoric rise. There's an estimated 25 million users of vaping products worldwide, which is fascinating. And I think it's been all about the pent-up demand from smokers, their demand for an interest in safer alternatives to combustible tobacco products, to cigarettes. That was an enormous pent-up demand. The product emerged 2008, 2009, and since then we've seen this enormous explosion. And that explosion in demand has been, the demand has been met by the entrepreneurial SME businesses, a lot of the, as we know, most of the early innovation all coming from China. But it is that innovation which was able to meet this enormous demand. And I think the other thing is very important to understand where the industry is currently and where it's going, is to understand the evolution of the product and the category over those 7 years.
If I may say and repeat for the benefit of our audience, haters of vaping products sometimes spread misperceptions that the vaping industry would have come out somehow out of the tobacco industry, and this is absolutely not true. In fact, it is the tobacco industry, if anything, was a latecomer to this game, if you wish, and in fact, the product was generated by people completely unaffiliated with tobacco companies, and also, as you said, to meet consumer needs. So it's almost a consumer-generated product, if you wish.
Yeah. I think it is. I think that's right. I would probably describe it as, you know, from left field came the emergence of the liquid nicotine technology and the vaping products. It has been oft-stated that the tobacco industry and the major tobacco multinationals have been searching for safer alternatives over the last, 10, 15, 20 years. But you're right when you say that the vaping products, the use of liquid nicotine to vaporize that technology, absolutely, it did not come from the major tobacco multinationals. It came from the small entrepreneurial businesses, and that in itself explains the fragmentation and diversity that is a characteristic of our industry now. But I think also the sort of 7 years since the products first emerged has all it's done is exacerbate and grow that fragmentation and diversity. You know, the first products were products that looked like cigarettes. You know, now they're being called cigalikes, but early days. Now, for very obvious reasons, they look like cigarettes. To be able to make them readily understandable what they were, appealing to smokers. That to me is not rocket science. But on the other hand, it became sort of almost part of the problem because it looked like a cigarette and it looked like somebody was smoking. Then there were a lot of people who would, well, we don't want those, we don't want those, we don't want anything that looks like smoking. But you know, the categories evolved very quickly after that, and you know, the people the users who first went to these products, they immediately quite quickly, they wanted products that could deliver them more nicotine or higher levels of performance, longer lasting batteries. All these sorts of things drove, you know, the development of the larger products and as you know, the sort of ego type products, and then you had the tank products where people could actually be putting in their own liquids. Now that in itself drove the evolution of the liquid market, and then you had these products that people were self-assembling, and that grew the whole hobbyist element of of people who like to vape, and then more recently we're seeing people coming up with product iterations that try and combine the convenience factor, which undoubtedly the cigar-likes provide, with the higher delivery and higher performance of the larger products. So it is very, very exciting to see what's happened there. But all of that innovation has meant that the industry is further sort of fragmented, diversified, because you've got different market segments. This industry has grown up in the internet age, so a lot of the business has been online, so a lot of it's grown up online rather than in traditional retail channels. Yes, a lot of the products were first sold when they went into retail. They were sold in the traditional tobacco outlets. Now you have, with the emergence of the liquids market predominantly, you've now seen the emergence of, or we are seeing and continuing to see the emergence of the specialist vape stores. So I think you need to understand all of those dynamics to understand, you know, where the industry currently is. And the third factor, of course, in terms of that fragmentation, is the fact that the players in the industry come in all shapes and sizes. And you know, there are businesses now, the tobacco industry, the major tobacco companies. Yes, they started investing. Help me with the date, but you know, 2012, there was investment started from the tobacco industry, which I think was wonderful news. It was an acknowledgement that, you know, they were realizing that these products were very popular with their consumers and their smokers, and they realized that, you know, the fastest growing sector of the nicotine product market, and they have been for the last 7 years. So quite clearly, it should be welcomed by everybody who's interested in these products, that you know, the tobacco industry are selling them and providing them as a range of products to their consumers. But the players do range from small companies to bigger companies to the big multinationals, and the pharmaceutical industry have invested in the category as well. So we have a very fragmented and diverse scene at the moment.
Speaking of manufacturers of conventional cigarettes, clearly they see where this industry is going. They clearly see the need for harm reduction alternatives, to the point where we were discussing yesterday an investment call by Philip Morris International and the statement by the CEO, right?
Yes, and that's a statement which is tremendously exciting to see. And you know, the quite unequivocal commitment from the CEO of Philip Morris International towards reduced risk products, and a statement that, you know, potentially in his lifetime, that, you know, that they as a company will not be selling combustible cigarettes. I think it bears out what I say earlier about there's enormous consumer demand amongst smokers for safer alternatives, and you know, I think it's great to hear that from such a, you know, enormous and, you know, most important organisation in the tobacco industry like Philip Morris. So that is great, and you know, yes, they're doing a lot of work on a new platform of technology, which is heating tobacco rather than heating liquid nicotine. I don't believe we should be getting hell-bent on saying our product's better than yours or our technology's better than yours. I think we should be acknowledging that all of these products provide safer, alternatives to combustible tobacco products. So we're all in the same boat on this, and we've all got to fight the same issues, promote the benefits of these products together and collectively.
And raise awareness, because that brings me to my next question to you. What are some of the factors that might drive the growth of the industry, and conversely, what are some of the factors that might inhibit the growth of the industry?
Well, the challenges of the industry, which is probably the theme of your question there, Patricia, the challenges of the industry are how these products are best regulated. And that is something which governments and regulators around the world have grappled with for the last few years. And some clarity is now emerging. And I think as an industry, we need to understand the concerns that governments and regulators have been grappling with about how best to regulate these products. And we've been on a bit of a journey, haven't we? When we think where we started in Brussels, and there was a perception that these products would only be used by somebody who smoked, who wanted to stop smoking. So that made them a medicinal nicotine replacement therapy product, an NRT product. As you know, you and I were closely involved in talking to people in Brussels and raising awareness of what a vaping product was. And I think there was a recognition that these not everybody will be using a vaping product in the way that they will be using an NRT product. They are different. And
they're ultimately a consumer product, and
well, they are ultimately a consumer product. But I think governments can, and I'm not being critical of governments when I say it, but governments can be slightly binary in terms of it's got to be one thing or the other. And I think we saw this sort of perception that well, if they're not a medicinal product, they must be a tobacco product. And that's something which I think I've always been a bit troubled by, but I understand why it's ended up by being like that. And I think that that's part of the stuff that we as an industry need to be doing, that I would very much like to think that 5-10 years out, there will be a separate regulatory framework for vaping products as consumer product, whatever.
A bespoke type of regulation.
Bespoke regulation.
So what would the industry have to do in order to accomplish that?
Well, first, the industry is one of the challenges we've got, and I think that a divided, fragmented, unjoined up, disunited industry is very, very unhelpful. I think there is still, because we're a young, nascent industry, there's still a lot of immaturity in the industry. I think the industry does some things at times which make it our own worst enemy, and we've got to improve our act on that. And I think to do that, I think first off, I think the industry should acknowledge that the disruption being caused by our products in this sort of smoking combustible tobacco product space has only just begun. If sales are 7 billion, I think that the industry as a whole should realise that smokers around the world are spending $700 billion on smoking products. So we're only a small tick at the moment on that. So the disruption that can go from here is potentially stratospheric. Goldman Sachs in 2013 identified us as one of the most disruptive technologies on the planet. If more of the industry could understand that and then recognise what needs to be done to enable that disruption to start happening, and that will be about the industry coming together more, working collaboratively. And by coming together more, I don't mean anybody who's not a cigarette company talking to another company that is not a cigarette company. I mean the entire industry. I mean everybody working in a collaborative way, so that we can be championing the benefits of these products.
So one of the opportunities that you and I have discussed in the past for a collaborative initiative would be product standards. I'm sure there are others that you have in mind, but can we talk a little bit about what it would entail getting together around defining product standards?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head as one of the most important things in terms of the standardization of products. And if our products are going to go mass market, become mainstream, there must be a standard to which all of our products are made. And that means, in terms of the quality of the product, the safety of the product, how it's made, the processes and all of the rest of it. Now there is work going on those areas and that is fantastic. I think the industry needs to coalesce around that work rather than saying mine's better than yours and all the rest of it. I think people should be working as collaboratively as possible on those standards. I think that's critical because that can address the issue of the naysayers, as it were, who want to say that our products are dangerous and they don't like them and all of the rest of it, and continue to scaremonger. So product standards is unquestionably at the top of the list. I think there are other areas where the industry needs to act and act quickly. One is in terms of its standards, in terms of how it markets and presents and holds itself out. And I don't just mean to the consumers and end users, I mean to the society at large. We do need to, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think there are some unhelpful things that the industry might do in presenting an image of vaping, which is definitely not a mainstream mass market image, which is going to help the continued growth. And so I think that's an important area, and I think that research is a very, very critical area because, you know, one of the issues is we need to be continually on top of the fact that, you know, it is very helpful that Public Health England and the Royal College of Physicians have reported that our products are, you know, at least 95% safer than cigarettes. Standardization will be able to ensure that every single product that on the market is at least 95% safer. But there are still unanswered questions. Our products have only been on the market for 7 years. We need to be doing continuing work so we can be right across the issue of the effects of long-term use. That is an absolutely critical piece. So those are probably the three things I would put down as an absolute priority. But what is holding those back at the moment is a lot of separate agendas being played out and people being very, very possessive about ownership of things. And I think, you know, for the common good and for there to be an outbreak of common sense in taking vaping forward, that would be, you know, my view about what we need to be doing.
So just to resume what you've said, to recap what you've said, we believe that the product will continue to evolve provided that regulation will not hinder innovation. And we've seen that in the US, this is precisely the case. The FDA deeming rule basically froze innovation as of August 8, 2016. We also believe that there is more need for the industry to come together in the areas of product standards, consistent advertising, or at least some standards in advertising, as well as generally communicating where the industry is, and research. Now, of course, doing collaborative research can have some issues there, but we all know that we will eventually have to conduct research on our product. Here in the US, we have to, in order to be able to maintain our product on the market through the PMTA approval process. But some of us have already engaged voluntarily with a couple of the university institutions in such research. What, in your view, is the best and the worst scenario in terms of regulation? Because we have seen these polarizing extremes, with the US being extremely radical in the way it regulates products. Some countries have absolutely no regulation of e-cigarettes around the world, and the EU has, you know, a little bit of a regulation that really does not accomplish neither the standardization goals or, frankly, the safety goals of the product. So what, in your opinion, would be some of the elements of a bespoke regulatory scheme that would enable and encourage innovation and still offer some protection to the consumers?
I don't want to sound myopic in terms of how I respond to that, but and because I'm from the United Kingdom, to say we have to start in the United Kingdom, and we undoubtedly have to use the leadership that Public Health England have shown in terms of their endorsement of harm reduction and their support for vaping products. Now, that wasn't something that you know, came about lightly. There was a lot of work done, and I think public health officials, tobacco control officials, scientific community, you know, the leading scientific nicotine experts around the UK came together, and they didn't take the decision lightly. They spent a lot of time reviewing the evidence, looking at all of this stuff, and they have led the way in terms of saying, yes, the harm reduction approach does make sense in terms of tobacco control, reducing tobacco consumption and all the rest of it. I.e., for those who don't necessarily totally understand it all, look, people who smoke but who continue to want to use nicotine, these are some alternatives. So reduce the harm that you are getting from the way you are currently taking nicotine. Take nicotine in a cleaner format. So the harm reduction, previously the other approach had been, look, you stop smoking, you quit, or you die. But the harm reduction approach is, look, there is an alternative way of you enjoying your nicotine. That has been embraced and has been led from the UK. And the industry should coalesce. The UK public health community has shown leadership, tremendous leadership, and bravery in terms of it wasn't necessarily in line with what tobacco control folk in other parts of the world have been saying and chose to be saying. And a lot of emotion revolves around tobacco control. It does gets quite a heated space, as it were. Ideologies do come to the fore quite often. But that aside, the tobacco harm reduction firmly endorsed in the UK and some other experts around the world. And I think as an industry, we should acknowledge the leadership that they've shown, and we should coalesce around that and use that as a platform for elsewhere. Now, in answer to your question about what would a sensible regulatory framework look like, well, a sensible regulatory framework, the fundamental principle of it should be that the framework should recognise a range of products with different risk profiles attached to them. A range of nicotine products, and we all know the different graphs that are shown, where at one end you might have combustible tobacco products, regarded as the most effective way of getting nicotine to you as quickly and as quickly as humanly possible, right the way down to licensed NRT products, which are, I suppose, the cleanest way of delivering nicotine to a smoker. And so the framework should recognise that there is a range of different products, and whether those are our products, whether they are the smokeless tobacco products, whether they are the other heated tobacco products that are currently being worked on, we should have a suite of regulations which fit that suite of products, and that's what I would urge and like to see happen more than anything else.
Thank you, Charles. In fact, coincidentally, as we are recording this webinar, the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control Conference of Party is taking place in New Delhi in India. And just yesterday, some very alarming reports came out about a few countries, including Kenya, India, I believe Malaysia perhaps, even proposing a ban on electronic nicotine delivery systems. Certainly, we will have an opportunity to debrief the Conference of Parties and what the World Health Organization is doing on that. In the meantime, I thank you very much for your time and look forward to continuing the conversation in the new year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you from us here at Nicopure Labs, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.